pretty good. It's sturdy. I'll appreciate it for today. Welcome again online. My name's Ross. I feel moved to say something I don't often say. Our church, you could describe it as a network of tiny churches and partnerships that also gathers on Sunday morning. We're a network of small groups or tiny churches and partnerships that also gathers on a Sunday morning. That's a way of saying that Sunday morning is not the most important thing we do. It is an important thing we do. It's a spiritual practice that is good for us as individuals and as a community. So, what I'm about to say I don't mean to come across as the most important thing, but I do want to challenge you a little bit. If this is good for your soul, then share it with other people in the context of relationship. I mean, if you're so moved at Walmart or wherever, and you're just like, hey, you should come on Sunday. If the Spirit moves, then by all means do it. Evangelism, the reason we don't like that, the reason we've had bad experiences, is because people didn't do it in a relationship. We all had the experience of somebody who had a sign on the street corner. Or maybe now in our times on Facebook, some stranger trolled your comments and said something like, wow, where did that come from? Evangelism is simply the practice of gathering people into the goodness of Jesus. Gathering each other. So, share it. Invite people as the Spirit moves online. If you want to share this right now online, do so. Not because Sunday's the most important thing, but because we believe this is a spiritual practice and a community worth being a part of. So, now the most important question of our day is, does anyone in here know what a burner account is? Burner account. What's a burner account?
Yeah, I know what a burner phone is.
Closely related, a little bit. A little bit. You're like, what in the world? Well, let me describe it to you. God bless him. Do you know who Kevin Durant is? How many know who Kevin Durant is? All right, we got about 50. He is an NBA basketball player. He is a professional basketball player who doesn't care what anyone else thinks about him. So much so that he created fake accounts on Twitter, a social media platform, so he could respond to his critics with those fake accounts. Because he doesn't care what other people think. He doesn't care about what people think so much that he created these other fake accounts to respond to what other people think about him without other people knowing that he is responding to what other people think about him. I'm learning as I get older, and I know you're still a kid, Ross, which is true, The first thing you can know about someone who says, I don't care about what anyone else thinks of me, is that they really care what someone else thinks about them. All right? Because if you have to say that, you really care. And you know what? I care what people think about me. No matter what I say, I really care. And I think to an extent you should. I don't think you can build your life on it. But you should care what other people think about you in a sense. We all create burner accounts. Maybe not literally on social media, but all of us. Maybe because of something that happened to us in the past. Or something we did in the past. It creates this great fear in us. You can't help but go live in the world and experience some really hard things. If you're a human and you live in the world, you've done some really bad things. Because you're human. And because of that past, we have this fear that we live in, I believe. This great fear that my life isn't adding up to something. Is my life adding up to something? Does my life matter? And we create these false selves, a kind of burner account, these personas to deal with our greatest fears, rather than confronting our fears genuinely and letting Christ transform us or resurrect us into the true person we are in God. We all have false selves. We all do it to protect ourselves, to be safe. And one of the ways that comes out to get to our series is we use a lot of force and control in our lives. Anybody here a control freak? I'll raise my hand high on that one. You use a lot of force. You use a lot of control. Here's the truth. Everybody is. There's nobody who doesn't use a lot of control and force to manage what other people think of them, to manage other people's actions, to try to create certain outcomes. We all use a harshness, a force and control to create outcomes that we want to happen, to create a certain image so people think something of us that we want them to think, or to do something in our careers so that we add up to something. We're all so terribly afraid of something else too. We're all going to die. Did you know that? We're all running from our mortality. So many of the things that we're doing are we're going to die. We're dying and we know it. And that scares the hell out of us. We have no gentleness in our way. Today, we're in this series called Inspired. What happens when you live by the Spirit? We started this series 8 weeks ago. Today's week 8. We only have 1 week left. Where a guy by the name of Paul writes letters to people in a place called Galatia. It's in modern-day Turkey. In the first century, so like 2,000 years ago about, people who are struggling to follow Jesus and trust in Jesus in their time. And he says, if you do that, if you follow Jesus, and you let the power of the Holy Spirit work in your life over days and weeks and months and years, you can expect to produce certain fruit. Your life, like a tree, will produce certain fruit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness. And today, I heard at the back, gentleness. 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 We're going to talk about that today. Like all this control and force that we use rooted in our great fear results in a lack of gentleness and humility in our way. We're working so hard to force certain outcomes. We're working so hard to manage our self-image. We're working so hard to make other people do what we want them to do that we have no gentleness or humility in our way. And it's the fruit of the Spirit of virtue that I think we need. I think it's the one we need more than anything in our time. I said that back when we were doing a series called Blessed, where Jesus says, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. It's the same word in the original language. Meek, gentle, humble. All of us are living in this great fear that our lives aren't adding up to something. They're not going the way that I want them to go. Oh my God, and I'm going to die too. In a world that's chaotic and evil and there's injustice, I better harshly control things. Or else. I'm going to pause. Does that ring true to you? If so, why? If it doesn't ring quite true to you, you're like, I don't know if I agree with that. Anything. Tell me why. I know it's very open-ended. Does what I just said ring true to you at all? If so, why? If you're like, I'm not sure I totally agree, and here's why. I'll sit here in silence until somebody says something. So if I could rephrase that, Christy, if I false in my rephrasing, say, no, you screwed it up. This is a basic human pattern. It's happened for ages. We live in a world that's chaotic, where evil reigns. Trauma happens to us. Out of the trauma, we learn that the best way to avoid pain is to exert a lot of control and force, so we prevent future trauma. So even when things are going well, it's like, oh my, I almost have to up the control because the shoe has to drop in a minute. So, right?
Yes.
Okay. Make sure you're right. Who else? Does it ring true to you or not?
I'm kind of different.
Let's hear it, Maureen.
I kind of have this naive, childlike approach. I don't think about the other shoe dropping. I just live my life and I'm happy and carefree and happy-go-lucky. I don't have to worry about it. I don't want to lose sleep over what might happen. I don't know if that's right or wrong.
We're going to talk about that a little bit. It probably won't be the same thing. I don't think that's a totally bad way. Jesus talks about making your way back to a childlike faith, not a childish faith, but being childlike in a mature way. There's a difference. So yeah, I think that's a good thing. Can be a bad thing too. But what else? Does it ring true? Anybody online, Christy?
Don't have anything yet.
When we feel like we're losing control, we just dig in harder sometimes
Yeah.
and say things and do things that we shouldn't. One of my favorite quotes from a speaker I heard once is, "Life would be easy if it weren't for other people."
Yeah.
And when I lose control, it takes me a while to really feel the Spirit and just let things go and try to let go, let God. But sometimes it takes us a long time to.
Yeah. Yeah. So Dave was describing how he experiences like when you almost feel like you're losing control, kind of like what I said, you almost double down. Especially when it's involving people, because people are hard to deal with. I'm hard to deal with some days. Many days, maybe Angela would say. I don't know. Yeah. So it's hard to feel the Spirit moving when you're in that place. Definitely.
I think a lot of times, too, we overreact and try to fix life so other people can't be harmed by pushing at them and telling them, you ought to do this, you shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
When they have the opportunity with the relationship with God to do what they need and want to do. But I tend to push to protect them.
Yeah. So my dad is a fixer. So when he senses that somebody's struggling, he's like a doctor with prescriptions sometimes. Like, okay, so I realize what you need to do. You need to set up a spreadsheet. For all of us, our greatest asset can also be our liability on any given day, right? So, hey, I please keep commenting. Literally any time you can say, hey, I got a question or I got a comment. I dare you to do it. Jesus was able to be gentle and humble in his way. In the original language, it gets translated both things, gentle and humble. I'm going to give you a brief snapshot of what gentleness is, because if you're like me, it's like, I'm not really sure I understand what this is at all. I'm going to show you a brief snapshot of what gentleness is, a couple snapshots of what gentleness is not, and then come back to Jesus and we'll be done. Are you with me? Okay. Quick snapshot. Jesus was able to be gentle in his way, humble in his way, because instead of being rooted in this great fear, like, is my life adding up to something? Do I matter? And oh my God, I'm going to die. This is an evil, chaotic world. What could happen to me? Instead of being rooted in a great fear, his life was rooted in a great trust in God's character, in his identity in God, and the movement of God's Spirit in and around him. Instead of a great fear, he had a great trust in who God is, in his identity in God, in the movement of God's Spirit in and around him. He didn't have to exert a bunch of force. Control. Go read the stories of his life and read it through that lens. Pay attention to how little control Jesus had with people. Very little. You'll be shocked at it. How often he asked questions. How often he just sat with people. Because he trusted. He had a great trust. His way was very gentle in that. You're going to see more of that in a minute. So that's the beginning of gentleness. Let's talk about what gentleness is not. It contrasted with the leaders of Jesus' day. The leaders in Jesus' day were just like you and me. They just happened to be in positions of power. Jesus said of religious leaders of his time, he criticized them and said, you expect people to carry burdens on their backs that you yourself are not willing to carry. What was he criticizing them of? Inauthenticity. They were expecting things of people that weren't genuine. It was a way of controlling other people to build themselves up. You ever done that? Where you expected something of somebody else in order to protect you, in order to build you up. It wasn't really with their wellness in mind. And so it came across as force, control. It was harsh. Jesus is like, you guys put burdens on people's backs that you're not willing to carry yourself. He accused them of being fake. He was calling out their great fear. They used religion to make sure their lives were adding up to something. He criticized their long, wavy robes that they wore, their long, flowery prayers, because they were trying to use religion to build themselves up. They weren't gentle and humble in their way. They were forceful, burdensome. Let's take one more snapshot from a leader. Emperor Nero. Emperor Nero was a guy who existed 2 or 3 decades after Jesus. This guy was troubled, if we might say that. He was so consumed by this insecurity and fear that if people just didn't do what he wanted to do, he just got rid of them, including his family members. It's like, oh, you're not doing what I like you to do? See you later. Poison him. Kill him. He had this other problem that came up during his reign. There was this movement organizing of a bunch of poor, lowly folk who said they followed this guy who was a carpenter from Galilee. They were calling him the Messiah or something. And there was a growing number of them. And he was like, gosh, they're causing me trouble. I don't like it. So there was a fire in Rome, and he said, you know what? They did it. And he started one of many persecutions that Christians experienced in the Roman Empire. When we are consumed by this great fear of like, oh my God, like, am I enough? Is my life adding up to something? Is God out there in this chaotic, evil world? And we just, all this force, control. I'm going to say a couple more things and then it's going to be back to you for your comments. I venture to guess this is how we do it day to day. Rooted in this great fear, is my life added up to something? Does my life mean anything? Am I going to be destroyed by the chaotic forces of the world around me? In that great fear, one, we try to manage our self-image. I want everyone to think a very certain thing about me, so I'm going to work really hard to make them think that. That's one way we do it in relationships. Really subtle ways. One, we can be really forceful. We can make people interact with us on our terms or else. If you don't act a certain way, if you don't speak a certain way, if you don't show up in my life a certain way, you're dead to me. I'm going to judge you. I'm going to let you know it. do a subtle form of control. We just hide. We stop engaging. We don't pray about it. We don't talk about it. How's that a lack of gentleness? You can't be gentle with people you're not engaging with. You can't bear fruit of the Spirit with people that you've just quit interacting with. I can hear it in your heads right now. But Ross, what about these difficult people, though? Do I just keep letting them harm me? That's not what I said. Prayerful, mindful boundaries can be an act of gentleness. Forceful control and judgment, or completely hiding, not gentle. We also do it in our work, right? We use our careers. I know nobody in this room has done this, but we've seen it in other people, right? They're using their career to I got to make my life mean something. Have you worked for anybody like that? You haven't done it, I know. My career has to make me mean something. My legacy has to be that I was promoted. I had this title. I made all this money. You know what happens when you're dead? Your title means diddly squat. Your money? Nothing. But boy, when we're living, it's like, I have to make my life mean something. I'm going to work so hard. We see this elsewhere. We see harshness, control, force in social issues and politics. All the rage people have right now, man, all the rage that I sense in people sometimes is that they're trying to prove to other people that I'm one of the wise ones. All right, we're almost done. Practically done. But I want to turn it back to you. How does it show? Any of that true to you? Yes, Ross? Yep, that's me. Or is there another way where you demonstrate force and control in your life, maybe because it's rooted in this great fear? How do you demonstrate force and control in your life, do you think? And as we say in a couple of our meetings, I'll let the silence go to work. The pandemic made it easy, gave you an excuse to hide. Yeah. The pandemic had a great way of fanning the flames of our fears. Right? We saw a lot of people totally losing their gentleness and humility, responding with a lot more harshness, judgment, force. Yeah. How do you exercise a lot of force and control in your life? This is the hardest thing to do day to day. Self-examination. To sit with yourself, look at yourself in the mirror and say, this is really how I'm dealing with my pain and my fear. It's hard to sit with. It really is. So I'm not surprised that, maybe the question stinks, but I'm not surprised that the practice of maybe looking deeply into yourself is hard to do because honestly we're out of practice with it. We just keep going, which is a way we exercise force and control in our lives. If I just stay busy and I just keep my routine doing what I do, then I won't have to listen to my fear that's so just deep down. I won't have to unearth the things that I'm really, really afraid of and let Christ go to work in me. To close, Jesus is the Lord of gentleness and humility. If you want to watch a guy who's got nothing to prove, pay attention to Jesus. God, I want to be like him. I want to, I don't want to fake. I don't care what anybody thinks of me. If I ever say that, I want any one of you to say, Ross, that is a lie. I'm going to expect it because I really care. And sometimes it consumes me. I want my life to add up to something so badly. I'm afraid of this chaotic world in which I live, so I'm going to control, harsh, force. Watch Jesus. He trusts that he is God's beloved Son. He trusts in God's presence and work in him, around him. He believed, I swear to you, when he met somebody, he was like, oh man, the Father's already at work in you. I'm just here to walk with you and be a witness. He trusts, so he doesn't have to force, he doesn't have to control. 3, super fast snapshots. One time, he had a friend die named Lazarus, right before John 12, the next snapshot. He had a friend die named Lazarus. He got to the scene where his friend died, John chapter 11. Lazarus' sisters were mad. They came out and they repeated the same line, if you had been here, this would not have happened. If you aren't rooted in your identity, trusting in the work of God, how would you respond to that? Do you know who I am? Do you know what I've had to deal with today? Do you know what my week looked like in this pandemic? How dare you say that? Harsh, force, control. Jesus just sits with it. He's got nothing to prove. There's no insecurity rising up in him. He asked the question in the second, sister. Go look it up. It's in John 11. That's not what the sermon's on today. It's a beautiful question. When you ask questions, questions are one of the most gentle things you can do to people. Humble. You have no control then. You're asking the question. And then guess what he does next? He sees a group of people mourning, wailing, weeping. He has an idea he's about to raise this dude from the dead. But he's gentle and humble. So you know what he does? Anyone know? It's the shortest verse in the Bible. He wept. He mourns with them. He stops what he's doing just to be with them and weep. No force, no control. Showing with his actions, I'm with you. I trust that God is at work right now, even in this pain. Then, John 12, second snapshot. They're going to be fast. He's riding into town, and people are crying out, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord, from Psalm 118, which we read earlier. They're basically saying, this dude is the chosen one. You know what he does? He hops on a donkey's colt. I almost had Angie bring the donkey today. I should have given her more lead time. Corona. Angie has a donkey named Corona. We should have had it here today, Angie. I blew it. Think about it. All the leaders of his time, all of us, anybody ever, if power was coming our way, we'd gather our entourage. In his time, you would have rode into town on chariots. He's like, no, I don't need any of that. Give me that donkey over there. Zechariah says, behold, your king comes to you gentle and riding on a donkey. That's how Jesus does it. He's got nothing to prove. No force, no control. I can ride into town on this donkey. Either way, I'm going to get crucified. And either way, I'm going to be raised from the dead. Third snapshot. Chapter 13. In his last moments with his disciples, what does he do in John 13? Any Bible trivia nerds in here today? You can flex right now. What's he do in John 13? He puts a towel around his waist, gets down on his knees, and washes all of his disciples' feet. which was a lowly servant's job. Tell them to do likewise. Because when you trust, Jesus trusted in who God is. He trusted that he was God's beloved Son, and he trusted in the work of the Spirit in and around him. So he's like, I'll show you how to be like God. Get on your knees and wash people's feet. Serve people as a witness. Guys, we can trust God in the same way. That's what Jesus invites us to do. He comes to die on the cross to show us God's power at work. He's like, watch this. Evil will take me prisoner. Injustice will take me prisoner. The sins of the world will take me prisoner. Death will take me prisoner. And I will break out. And you will too. Because God's power is trustworthy. You are God's sons and daughters in Christ Jesus if you follow him. You will wake up to that. So go be gentle. Be humble. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. A couple of announcements before you go. Cool? Are you with me still, or we need to do a couple of jumping jacks real quick? All right, hey, a couple of announcements before we go. Number one, I always want to celebrate something with you. Right over there, our banner, you can't see it on there, but you know it. Our mission is we exist to make a lasting impact in our community.